If you're operating anywhere near the defense industrial base, or the DIB as we all call it, you know the drill.
Oh, yeah.
You spend months, I mean literally years, obsessing over internal controls. We're worrying about FIPS validation, physical access, whether the incident response plan is actually printed out or just sitting on a hard drive somewhere.
Right. But there's this pivot point. It's the moment you stop looking inward at your own network and you have to turn your gaze outward.
Yes.
You have to find the person or the organization who is actually going to judge you.
Exactly. We're talking about the C3PAO, the CMMC third-party assessment organization.
Yep.
It's a mouthful of an acronym, but choosing one is arguably the most high-stakes shopping trip a defense contractor will ever take.
It really is.
And thankfully, we aren't going in blind today. We've got our hands on a document that I think completely changes how you should approach this. It's the C3PAO shopping guide from the National Defense ISAC.
This guide is essential. What I love about it is that it just dispels the myth that this is a commodity purchase. You're not buying a server or a software license where you can just sort by lowest price.
And like checkout.
Yeah, you're hiring a partner for a high liability event. I mean, this is more like hiring a brain surgeon than buying a laptop.
And if you pick the wrong surgeon, the consequences are, well, they range from expensive to catastrophic. So we're going to walk through the specific steps the ND-ISAC recommends for vetting these assessors.
We're talking everything. The intake process, technical gotcha questions.
And all of it. And we should probably say right up top, the goal here is to help you find the right fit, not just an assessor.
Yeah.
Because the wrong fit can fail you for all the wrong reasons.
Absolutely.
Right. And speaking of getting things right, before we dig into this race to the bottom, I just want to mention that this deep dive is brought to you by www.cmmcns.tools and baseline.compliancehub.wiki.
Great resources.
If you're listening to this and realizing, wow, I am not even ready to call an assessor yet because your documentation is a mess, those are the resources you need to bookmark immediately.
Absolutely. Documentation is the shield you bring to the battle. Without it, the best assessor in the world can't help you. You have to get your house in order first.
So let's talk about this race to the bottom. The ND-ISAC guide opens with a pretty stern warning here. As a business owner, my instinct is efficiency. I want the cert, I want it fast, and I don't want to overpay. That feels smart.
It feels smart in a vacuum, but in compliance, the incentives are skewed. The market creates pressure to find the easiest assessor. Someone who might gloss over the hard stuff.
The rubber stamp.
Rubber stamp.
The guide is explicit. There's an incentive to find a C3PAO who just gives you a thumbs up so you can get back to billing the DoD.
But the guide warns that this is a trap.
A massive trap.
Yeah.
If you choose an assessor who cuts corners because they're the cheap and easy option, your assessment results can be, and this is the key word, nullified. Nullified. Let's just sit with that for a second. That is the nightmare scenario.
It is. Imagine passing the audit, telling your prime you're certified, and then the DoD or the Cyber AB reviews the assessment quality, which they do.
Which they do.
And they say, this wasn't a valid test. This assessor didn't do their job. You lose the certification, you lose the money, and potentially you lose the contract.
So you're not just paying for a certificate, you're paying for the credibility of that certificate.
Precisely. You want a reasonable assessment. That's the term the guide uses. It needs to be strict enough to stand up to scrutiny, but reasonable enough to reflect reality. You're not looking for an easy pass, you're looking for a defensible pass.
Okay, so let's get tactical. How do we find that defensible partner? Step one in the guide is the intake process. And they argue this first phone call is actually a test.
It's a total test. Think of it like a medical consultation. If you go to a surgeon and say, I need surgery, and they immediately say, great, hop on the table, that's $50,000, without even asking where it hurts. You run. A competent professional has to diagnose the patient before they agree to treat them.
So if an assessor is ready to send me a quote without asking about my network boundaries, my CUI flow, how many locations I have, that's a red flag.
A huge one. They should be grilling you. They need to know your scope, your complexity, your readiness. If they're not asking those hard questions, it just means they have a cookie-cutter approach. And in CMMC, one size does not fit all.
There was one specific question in the guide about the pre-assessment review that really caught my eye. It felt like a safety valve for the business owner.
It is, and it's a brilliant contractual question to ask. You need to ask them. If we engage you for a pre-assessment review and you find a major show-stopping gap, can we pause the process without a huge penalty?
That's critical because once the formal assessment starts, the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to be locked into a fail just because you misunderstood one control.
Correct. You want a partner who will say, hey, your system security plan has a hole here. Let's stop. You go fix it and call us when you're ready. You do not want someone who drives you off a cliff just so they can bill for a failed assessment.
Speaking of billing, let's move to step 2, cost and availability. We already said cheap is expensive, but there are some hidden pricing mechanics the guide points out.
Yeah, the big variable is remediation. Let's say you go through the assessment and you miss 2 controls. CMMC allows for a remediation period. The question you have to ask is the reassessment of those 2 items included in the base price?
Or does the meter start running again?
Or does the meter start running again? That could double your cost if you're not careful. Oh, you want me to look at that log again? That's another $5,000.
Right. And then there's the headcount issue, the busload of auditors problem.
Yes. You need transparency on the team size. If they quote a low daily rate but send 5 people who all need travel and lodging, your budget is just blown. And honestly, can your IT staff even handle babysitting 5 auditors at once? Because you can't leave them alone.
That's a great point. And availability is the other side of that coin. The guide uses the word bottleneck. We know there are only so many authorized C3PAOs.
Supply and demand are not in your favor. As the rule gets finalized, the queue is going to explode. The guide warns that timelines are fluid. Someone might say we can start in August, but by the time you get budget approved next week, August is gone.
So lock it in early. And hey, while you are sitting in that queue because you might be waiting 6 months, that is the perfect time to go to baseline.compliancehub.wiki.
Use that time wisely. Use the wiki to cross-reference your policies. If you have a 6-month runway, you should be doing dry runs, tabletops, scrubbing that documentation until it shines.
Okay, let's pivot to step 3, which I found the most interesting, the reasonableness factor. I think a lot of us view compliance as binary, a checklist. You either did it or you didn't, but the guide suggests there's a lot of gray area.
There is always subjectivity in auditing. The standards NIST 800-171 are written in English, and English is open to interpretation. Reasonableness is the measure of whether an assessor applies common sense or just rigid theoretical logic.
So how do we interview for common sense? We can't just ask, are you reasonable?
Oh, you have to use scenario-based questions. The guide suggests asking about historical data. For example, ask them, if I implement a new log aggregation tool today, how much data do you need to see?
And if they say 6 months and you only turned it on last week?
You fail. A reasonable assessor understands that maturity takes time. If the system is working now and you can prove it's functional, that should be sufficient. An unreasonable assessor might demand history you simply don't have.
The other big friction point is the cloud. We all use it. What's the reasonableness test there?
This is huge for small businesses. If you store CUI in the cloud, the assessor needs objective proof that the provider is secure. Some assessors might demand a FedRAMP authorization letter.
Which you usually can't get.
Right. Or the vendor just won't give it to you. You're stuck. A reasonable assessor might accept a customer responsibility matrix or other vendor documentation. You have to verify their standard of proof before you sign anything.
And this touches on managed service providers, right? For a lot of listeners, their MSP is their IT department.
And the assessor has to respect that. You should ask, is my MSP allowed to lead the assessment on my behalf? If the assessor insists on only talking to the CEO who doesn't know how the firewall is configured, it's going to be a disaster.
That segues perfectly into step 4, technical aptitude. The guide is basically saying, don't hire a generalist for a specialist job. The DIB is weird. We have weird networks.
We do. We have manufacturing floors, secure enclaves, research labs. If you hire an auditor who has only ever looked at corporate law firms, they're going to struggle with a machine shop.
So what are the shibboleths? What words should we drop to see if the assessor flinches?
Start with enclaves. Many small businesses build a secure bubble, an enclave, for their CUI. Ask the assessor, do you know how to assess a segmented enclave versus a full enterprise? If they don't get the boundary concept, they might try to audit your cafeteria Wi-Fi.
A total waste of time and money. What about modern tech? I'm thinking software shops using Docker containers, things that spin up and down.
That is a classic trap. If your infrastructure spins up and destroys itself every hour, how do you audit that? If the assessor gives you a blank stare when you mention Kubernetes or VDI, they are not the right fit.
They won't understand how the controls apply.
Exactly. They might ask, where's the antivirus on that container, when that question doesn't even make sense.
And then there's the opposite problem, the legacy nightmare. That Windows XP machine running the CNC lathe.
The bane of every manufacturer's existence. You can't patch it, you can't put AV on it, and the vendor went out of business in 2008.
But it makes the part that goes into the fighter jet. It has to stay.
Exactly. So you need an assessor who understands compensating controls, someone who accepts that since you can't patch it, you've air-gapped it and locked it down. If the assessor just says, nope, the rule says patch it, you fail.
They need to understand intent, not just text.
Yes. And one more technical note on MSPS, the guide mentions DIBCAC. If your MSP has already undergone a DIBCAC assessment, your C3PAO should respect that.
So ask them if that matters.
Right. If they say, no, I need to re-audit them from scratch, they're wasting your money redoing work the DoD already validated.
Okay, step 5 is about experience types, and this contains a really subtle but important distinction. The guide warns against people with a NIST 853 mindset. Can you unpack that?
This is fascinating. NIST 853 is the massive, sprawling standard for federal government networks. It assumes a federal budget, a federal staff. NIST 800-171, what CMMC is based on, is for commercial networks.
So if you hire an assessor who has spent the last 10 years auditing the Pentagon,
they're going to bring a sledgehammer to your small business. They might interpret access control with a level of rigor that's appropriate for a nuclear silo, but totally unreasonable for a 50-person machine shop.
So you need someone who understands the commercial world.
Yes. Ask them if they've done JSVA assessments or worked with companies of your size and in your sector.
Environment matching.
Exactly. If you're a machine shop with loud noises and shift work, don't hire an assessor who only does white-collar offices. They won't understand why you can't have a 15-minute screen lock on a machine that's actively cutting steel.
It's a safety hazard at that point.
It is. Context is king. And this applies to remote work, too. A lot of old-school auditors hate BYOD, bring your own device.
They want everything on a corporate laptop.
Right. So if your business relies on BYOD, you need to know their stance on it before you pay the deposit.
Okay, we're down to the final step, step 6, responsiveness and quality. The guide calls this a vibe check, which sounds informal, but it's really about professionalism.
It's just data. If you're trying to give them tens of thousands of dollars and they're slow to respond to your emails now...
Imagine what they'll be like during the audit.
Exactly. The guide also says to evaluate the quality of the conversation. Was the assessor distracted? Did they actually listen? Or did they just read off a script?
And references.
Right.
But not just asking, were they nice?
No. You need to ask the hard questions. Call their previous clients and ask, did you achieve certification? Did they change the price midstream? And crucially, did they move the goalposts?
Moving the goalposts is the worst.
Yeah. You want to know if the assessor stayed consistent? Did they spring surprises halfway through? That kills assessments.
So we've covered a ton of ground here. Intake, cost, reasonableness, tech aptitude, experience, and quality. It's a lot to track.
It is, but the ND-ISAC guide actually provides a tool for this. They mention a scoring spreadsheet, so you can weight these categories A through K and mathematically score your options.
I love that. Take the emotion out of it. Turn it into a business decision.
Yeah.
You can actually say, okay, Assessor A scored an 85, Assessor B scored a 70.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, you are entrusting this third party with your contract eligibility. It shouldn't be based on who bought you a nice steak dinner. It should be based on data.
Before we sign off, I want to circle back to the why. The source material ended on a thought that I found really provocative. It elevates this whole discussion above just passing a test.
It goes back to that race to the bottom we started with. If you, as a business owner, shop for the easy pass, the assessor who ignores the gaps, you might feel like you won.
You got the contract.
You got the contract, but you're sitting on a time bomb. And more importantly, you are weakening the herd. The defense industrial base is a collective ecosystem.
A chain.
It's a chain. And if you're the weak link that lets an adversary in because you bought a cheap audit, you're not just risking your business.
Yeah.
You are compromising the supply chain that supports national security.
That puts a different weight on the decision, doesn't it? It's not just compliance, it's duty.
Shop smart, but shop for quality. Your security and the nation's depends on it.
A huge thanks to the ND-ISAC for this guide and to our sponsors www.cmmscenis.tools and baseline.compliancehub.wiki for helping the DIB get ready. That is it for this deep dive. Good luck with your shopping, and we'll see you on the next one.